what is this virtual production? Should I explore that?
To me, it's fascinating work. It goes way beyond just modeling.
Is there any skills artists would need to retrain if trying to cross over?
There's definitely some retraining to be done in terms of making things look very photographic.
There's a massive amount of layoffs. Are we talking in need of 10,000 artists, 100,000 of artists?
Somebody who understands how to operate and kind of maximize one of these game engines, they could get a job in movie making, they could get a job in games making.
Do I want to work in the Hollywood industry?
I don't see the movie business as it is going away.
How do I get a job in virtual production?
Put hashtag virtual production. You probably get quite a few people interested just off of that.
Hi everyone, my name is Ninelli Anderson. I'm CEO of Devoted Studios and I'm your host at Devoted Speakeasy. Today we have a very special guest, Noah Katner. Hi Noah.
Hello.
Noah is kind of a guru of virtual production. He is a virtual production editor for American Cinematographer magazine. He also is a writer and editor. He is a co-founder of a consulting company that supports virtual production. He also has his podcast. He wrote a bunch of articles with regards to virtual production. And here you will ask, hey, no, this podcast, we normally run about video games. What's up with virtual production?
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
And that's the same question I've been asking myself for the last couple of years. Ever since I've heard about the developments that Unreal Engine have been pushing with regards to kind of combine the mediums of video games and movies, and pretty much every month was actually the latest announcements of GDC that Unreal Engine has released. We see more and more and more of intersection between movies and video games. Actually, Noah, I would love probably for you to chime in. Like, what have you seen as an intersect for video games and movies in the last couple of years, and maybe what do you see as a future for those two mediums combining?
Well, I mean, there's lots of ways they intersect. I mean, and in the abstract, of course, there's always been video games about movies or movies that are derived from video games. So there's always been that crossover in terms of you see intellectual property kind of go from one area to the other. But lately, it's the tools that are actually crossing over, because movies have traditionally used kind of slow post-rendering tools to make all their visuals. You know, apps like Maya, 3D Studio, Blender, things like that are what are traditionally used to create visual effects. Now, because game engines are looking so real and so high quality, and they're able to do everything in real time, we're now being able to put the visual effects directly in front of the camera as we're filming them. And tools like Unreal Engine are what are really powering this. So the same software that is being used to make the games is now being used to make movies. And you've probably seen a movie, a streaming series, a TV show or music video that have been filmed using this technique. So you've seen game engine technology come right into the movies. So it's just kind of a natural progression.
How do you feel is the adoption rates of the integrating of a gaming technology into movies right now? Like, is it 2%, 10%? What do you think would be the growing rate in the next 3 to 5 years?
It's accelerating quickly. In 2019, the first kind of major project that came out that was using game engine technology directly in front of the camera was The Mandalorian, the Star Wars series. And they just kicked off their 3rd season. So, I mean, you don't get much bigger than, a Star Wars, Disney, Lucasfilm kind of show. And that kind of opened up the floodgates. So in the past 2 to 3 years, we've seen a big proliferation of LED volumes, basically studios that have a giant LED wall or kind of a sort of a curved screen with a ceiling that's also LEDs, that's all being powered by game engine footage. And that went from 2-3 years ago, there were maybe 10 of those in the world, and now there are hundreds. And each one of those facilities is, a tens of millions of dollars investment. So it's definitely taking over quite a bit. The last couple of big Marvel superhero movies like Ant-Man 3 and Thor, I guess 4, I think, or maybe 4-3, whatever the most recent Thor movie was, were all shot with this technology. So, I mean, it's definitely at the very top end, and it's sort of slowly kind of coming down to more modest productions. Like the kind of setup I have in here is a good example. It's a very small screen, but I can easily do like dialogue scenes. I can do 2 to 3 people standing head to toe in front of it, and it's by not any means by Disney money that's powering it.
So yeah, as a company, Devoted Studios, we've been creating a ton of content for video games, but somebody who lives in LA and knows a little bit about the industry itself, I'm like, we could do things for virtual production, but a part of me is like, do I want to work in the Hollywood industry?
I met this lady in Hollywood. She had green hair, but damn, she looked good.
So you mentioned that it's a very fast-paced environment. Is there any other skills that artists would need to retrain and learn besides obviously the more higher resolution asset quality?
There's definitely some retraining to be done in terms of making things look very photographic and real, because I think in video games, there's a tendency to sort of light in whatever is the most convenient way for a scene, and maybe not necessarily in the way that light looks kind of photographically in the real world. And I think that's probably one of the biggest adjustments I hear from artists that are interested in making that shift into movies. Because it's, for some people, yeah. I mean, I suspect there's quite a few people in the gaming world that have zero interest in the movies and they love what they do. But at the same time, I do hear of a lot of people who want to cross over, and there's moonlighting too. I mean, not every position is necessarily on set. Like there's plenty of people that are just doing modeling or texturing or rigging that are never required to be anywhere on a set. So there's a lot of flexibility, but I think that's really the main thing, is just kind of like spending a lot of time looking at sort of how things look photographically, shooting photographs, and looking at movies and just kind of getting a sense of how a kind of cinematic style might differ from pure video games. And again, not to say that video games aren't getting more and more cinematic all the time. I mean, I would say they're almost on par already. So I think it's part of a continuum that an artist who's into video games is probably already on that path anyway.
We do have limitations in video games with regards to FPS and the amount of polygons that could be permitted in the scene for things not to fall apart. Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that. It was one of the conversations that I had with my art director yesterday with regards to differences in lighting. And I'm definitely going to butcher that. But for movies, it's more like when you do the character is in front, you have to like light him or them from the back. And then when it's a different camera angle, it's a totally different scenario of how things need to be lit. So lighting, fast-paced environment, high resolution of stuff. Is there any other technical things people should be aware of if trying to cross over?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you just said, performance. I mean, when you're making a video game, you might be targeting a specific sort of minimum system requirement, like maybe it's a PS5 game, maybe it's a Switch game, maybe it's a PC game. So you kind of know, what frame rate you got to hit. And if your scene is too complicated, your rig is too complicated or whatever, and you're dropping frames, you got to go back and decimate it or whatever. And there is kind of an analog in filmmaking, in the sense that what's driving the LED wall is essentially a computer or a series of computers that have pretty high specs. I mean, like you're talking, insane number of cores, and you're talking like A6000 cards. So I mean, it's about as high a PC spec as one could get, but it still has its limitations. And you obviously can't go below whatever the frame rate of the camera is. If it's a typical kind of cinema camera, you're probably shooting 24 frames a second. So you might want to get up to 48 on your performance just to be absolutely certain you never drop anything. Because, I mean, it's in a video game, if you drop one frame, okay, somebody's like, oh, this game's laggy, but they're not going to be like, oh, stop, this game is no good. Whereas in the movies, if you're watching a scene and all of a sudden the background just kind of freezes for half a second, everybody's going to be like, what is wrong with this movie? So, I mean, it has to be perfect.
Let's be honest. Players in video games will let you know if the performance, the FPS drop 1 point.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's going to be a lot of complaining right there. Could you walk me through the entire process from pre-production to a final shoot day when it comes to virtual production? So people who haven't been really deep in that kind of have a little understanding of it.
It is somewhat similar to video game development in the sense that, you're kind of starting with your story, you're kind of visualizing what it might look like, what the sets might be, the textures, the environments, the locations. And if it's a virtual production in the sense that you're going to shoot in an LED volume, you're kind of starting to define what your sets are, and you're going to decide what portion of the set is going to be real and built and what portion of it is going to end up on the LED wall. Like say it's a scene where people are driving down the street. Okay, you're probably going to have a real car that you're going to roll into the studio and park it in front of the screen. And then what's going to be on the screen is probably going to be like a scene of driving down the highway. So you kind of project that onto the LED volume and, play it back, and you put the camera maybe behind the car somewhere looking over the actors through the windshield, and it looks pretty good. If you look on my other angle real quick, you can see, there's a little bit more room here, but you can also see the floor, which obviously gives away the illusion. You can see the edge of the screen on that angle. So I would tend to want to stick in this angle. And because the camera is capable of focusing close up and throwing the background out of focus, it just kind of looks as if those things are much, much further away. When in fact, for me, this setup, the screen is maybe 6 feet away from me, but it looks like I'm sitting on a balcony on some, huge futuristic city where everything is quite far away. So, I would say the key takeaway with all this is that since you're going to film it and it's got to look photoreal in front of the camera, you can't defer that and fix it somehow later. It really is incumbent on you to prepare your environments and make them look their absolute best and make sure that they integrate well with whatever the foreground is going to be before you go to shoot, because obviously pre-production is not that expensive because nobody's, on the set, everybody's kind of working from home or whatever. And then once you go into production, it's like you're spending a lot of money every second. So it's like things cannot be delayed because something's not ready to shoot. So that's really the key takeaway, is just be prepared.
As you know, in the beginning of this year, there has been a ton of unfortunate events for the video game industry, with a massive amount of layoffs across a lot of different disciplines, including artists and engineers. How big do you think is the market? Are we talking in need of 10,000 artists? Are we talking in need of 100,000 of artists? And what do you think the market's going to be in the next 3 to 5 years?
It's tricky because the movie business is not completely unlike the video game business in the sense that it's very project based. You don't have a lot of people that are necessarily on staff making movies, past a certain level. I mean, there's executives that are in movie studios that are, there to sort of oversee all movies that are being made. And so, they might be more of a salaried position, but most of the people that end up working kind of work from movie to movie as project based. So, the truth is that, there is some constriction happening in the movie business as well. I mean, you're seeing layoffs at places like Disney, you're seeing layoffs at places like Amazon. But by the same token, people are watching more and more content at more and more places than ever. So, I mean, there's still a huge market for that. I'd say it's just, if anything, a bit of a reshuffling. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a limit to the amount of opportunity for people that might be interested in jumping into the movie biz, just because there is such a shortage. And it's like we had a very established movie business that was very green screen, visual effects based, that had been the same essential workflow for a few decades, and then all of a sudden, just this LED walls exploded out of nowhere and went from nothing to a huge industry in 3 years. So. There just weren't a lot of people to begin with who had that, not only that eye and that interest for filmmaking, but had a facility with game engines. So, I mean, I know of many facilities around the world that are looking for people to come in and be part of their art departments, looking for people that are, there to optimize and prepare assets and model scenes and things like that. So, I don't know. I don't think there's a limit to it. I mean, I don't see the movie business as it is going away. People are going to want, kind of less than interactive, let's just say, experiences. I mean, obviously video games as a business is still going to be around too, but people are also going to want to have that kind of kickback on the couch and just sort of, passively experience stuff that they get on Netflix and things like that. Exactly. I mean, you want to kind of disconnect and enjoy. So.
Oh, there are those days where I just walk in my house and I'm like, I just don't want anyone to talk to me. I just want to switch on the button and just have my mind disappear somewhere. So if I was an artist, I got laid off, or I want to change, like how do I get a job in virtual production? Where do I go?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see people all the time just getting gigs very quickly on LinkedIn. I mean, it's kind of the business social network. So, I mean, what I would do is I would just make like if you were to make like a 20-minute reel that had some very high quality photorealistic environments that were just being explored, in Real Engine. If you put that out as a reel and like put, hashtag virtual production, you probably get quite a few people interested just off of that. Because, I mean, I look on that hashtag and you see, a good cross section of people that have those skills, and they just immediately get a lot of like, oh my God, we can, like, where are you working right now? We'll take you. We have tons of space for stuff like that. So
Writing it down, making a reel with some environments and some maybe meta humans or other stuff, and not making it a static thing in isolation, but rather like a choreographed experience. Got it. You've mentioned quite a lot of things with regards to, opportunities and the good stuff about virtual production, right? What do you feel are the areas where maybe the technology is not where it's supposed to be, or not as work doesn't work as promised? What are the pitfalls? What are the things that, could be worked on more?
I happen to be lucky in that my wife owns a production company, so she does like big productions where we need this kind of setup to kind of explore it and be able to do demos and understand it. But I think it's probably going to be not in the foreseeable future that you could build something like this and in the average person's home. It's definitely expensive. It's complicated technologically, but I mean, for people that are really into it, it's kind of. I think there are ways to do it regardless of the resources. Yeah, I mean, what's fun about Unreal, I like what the most is that it's the kind of thing you can just get into and start playing with for free. Whereas, most other digital content creation tools like your Maya, whatever, it's like they might have a 30-day free trial, but I mean, once you get into that as a profession, you're paying, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year just to keep the app, and that gets rough if you're a freelancer.
Well, luckily, for modeling specifically, you can get away with Blender and exporting files, but definitely for production purposes, getting Maya licenses and Max licenses are very much affecting anyone's budget. So, yeah. I do remember though, like a flashback in, I think it was 2013, and it was like Gamescom conference, and it was like Epic Games booth was like selling Epic Engine. And I remember talking to them, and I was like, "Well, how much is your license?" And they're like, "It's $250,000 and 10% of your royalties."
It's not about the money, money, money. We don't need your money, money, money.
Seeing how the changing of the business model can affect the impact that you're doing to the industry, and you still collect the money, but just in the back end of the game is successful. And I think that's the model that Unreal has. Like if you haven't reached $1 million, then you don't pay anything, but after $1 million, it's a totally different conversation. In one of your lectures at Virtual Production Gathering in 2022, you mentioned new opportunities for virtual production technology, like using virtual cameras, virtual scouting, advanced motion capture performance, and other stuff. Have you seen notable progress around those areas? Any other cool things?
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff is always changing. I mean, this setup that I had, for example, was state of the art when we first installed it in 2020, and this year we renovated it. It's only 2 years later, basically, or 3 years later, and we renovated it with a set of screens that was essentially double the resolution. So, I mean, this stuff, like any tech, it's constantly evolving. And, now we're starting to see interesting new stuff happen with like generative AI. Like people are starting to get to the point where I can be one of these setups and I can just start talking to the AI and telling it how I want the buildings to look and how I want the sky to look. And, it just starts populating that. So, I mean, there's a lot, I've seen a lot of interesting updates to it already. And, the movie business in general has always been kind of a moving target, there's constantly some new camera or some new video format or some new lighting technology that sort of like just inches everything along.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the generative AI technology for virtual production? Because we played around with some tools that are in, let's say, 3D space, right? The 2D space is obviously, Midjourney is really dominating it. 3D space, we haven't really seen anything that is creating any impactful for production progress. I mean, some meshes, some, a more detailed blockouts, maybe, but that's something that could be done with an artist themselves. So what are the tools that you have played around, and what do you feel are the tools that would be creating an impact, and what's the size of impact? Are we talking, a year from now, no artists will be needed for virtual production, or 10 years from now? Like, where do you feel we're at?
As with any new tool, I mean, I think there's always going to be a significant number of people that are concerned that it might somehow cut into, their ability to get work. And it's true. I mean, 30 years ago, movies were shot on film, and so there was a whole cottage industry of people who knew how to process film and how to get it to look its best, and how to, there was this whole infrastructure, and all those people, went from this was their bread and butter job to nothing. That doesn't mean they lost out on being employed at something forever. It just means they had to pivot into some new way to, a lot of the people that used to be really good at processing film ended up being really good artists for grading digital footage. So I think it's going to be the same with generative AI, that a lot of the kind of boring tasks that probably most people that do them for a living now would admit they're not hugely excited about, but it's a living, are going to be the ones that go away. And as far as tools that I've seen that might make that happen, one tool I think in particular that is not necessarily generative AI, but is neural network, is this this process called NeRFs, or neural radiance fields. And all that is basically you create a model by photographing some real object. You can use video footage, you can use phone footage. Works best with phone because it's also capturing depth and sort of positional data. But basically what you're doing is you're digitizing something into the game world, let's just say. And what's cool about the NeRF is that what you're doing is essentially training a learning model so that it doesn't just capture it exactly in its present lighting, but it's capturing kind of how it reacts to light. Sure, there's a lot of people that are really good at making, let's say, shaders. But I mean, is that really what they want to do with the rest of their life? If it could say like, hey, you're actually just going to go out and photograph something for real, and the shaders will be calculated based on your capture, they'd probably be like, great, because that's kind of tedious work.
And have you seen those the NeRF tool already being deployed in the production of the movies or commercials?
Yeah. I just wrote an article about it for American Cinematographer. The first commercial that I could find is actually a commercial for McDonald's.
Anywhere but McDonald's, you still have no other choice at the airport.
Yeah, and it's cool. It's like it's this girl who's kind of remembering her childhood going to McDonald's with her parents, and so most of it is just her talking about her childhood. But then when you see the childhood, it's like it kind of is this bullet time effect where the camera, it looks like a camera, but it's really just somebody like panning around in Unreal Engine, one of these NeRF models. That's the kind of thing you could probably do in real life, but it would be this insanely complicated, robotic camera move, and everybody would have to hold perfectly still. Whereas, they were able to plot it perfectly because they just had this very highly photorealistic looking model of the scene, and then they could, put the camera virtually wherever they wanted. So, I mean, yeah, these things are definitely just starting to land, as with, a lot of this sort of AI generative artwork stuff. And I don't think we fully sorted out the ethics of it in any way, but I mean, that has never stopped anybody from, just using them anyway.
The last question I have for you is pretty much, I feel like there's a perception in the industry that virtual production is more the movies. But from what I am seeing, it's way beyond movies. It's in deploying in the architecture, in pretty much recreating plans or factories or cruise ships before actually committing to a giant buildup. What are the other applications that you're seeing of virtual production, and what are the other industries where we see more of the application of virtual production and gaming tools that used to be only games and now, becoming much broader than that?
It's funny because virtual production is meant to really be like an umbrella term of kind of anywhere in which the real world of filmmaking or, any sort of production really overlaps with virtual elements. I mean, LED volumes are the ones that are most visible these days and have the most interest, but I mean, that's kind of just one flavor of it. If you go back a few years to that, say, for example, that when they did the Lion King movie, the remake that came out, that kind of, it's sort of photorealistic animation, but it has this sort of style of a live action documentary, like a nature, like, something you'd see on like a Discovery Channel or something. And what they did was they basically made the movie in Unity first as a video game. Like, all the scenes were acted out by virtual characters in a video game. And then they would just play that back while a real movie crew would essentially, with different kind of movie making devices like tripods, dollies, cranes, drones, sort of film those scenes so that they would look like they were filmed by humans. That's what's fascinating to me, is that somebody who understands how to operate and kind of maximize one of these game engines, they could get a job in movie making, they could get a job in games making, they could get a job in architecture, in simulation, car design. I mean, half of the UIs that are in cars today come out of Unreal Engine. It's like they're trying to get all fancy and, all this super high tech looking. I think there's a lot to be said for, if you want to be able to have a career in any of those areas, mastering that tool and understanding all of its, possibilities, its capabilities, just leaves you in a position where, you could kind of shift around from industry to industry. To me, it's fascinating work. I mean, it goes way beyond just, modeling something. It's like there's an element of simulation to it that's just built into, because I mean, it's a game. It's like, it's not just the visual quality of something, which is all filmmaking kind of cares about for the most part. It's like, you can give it a set of rules, parameters, like procedures to follow, and just kind of let it go and see what happens. I mean, we're seeing that already. People are taking metahumans in Unreal Engine and turning them into background extras in movies. It's like, what just seems like people like, sitting in the background having coffee or something might have been real people, 5-10 years ago, sitting there on the stage, that now can just be in the screen, and you can't even tell because they're far away from the camera, and they kind of look, realistic in their movements, and you wouldn't even question that they're just real people back there. So it seems like we're always on the verge of some new ways to consume media, like whether that be VR headsets or higher resolution screens or some kind of, I don't know, holographic display that hasn't even been made yet. I mean, it feels like people looking at a flat 2D square on their wall is just going to become one form of entertainment. And, same with gaming too. It's like most people are still playing games on, they might have a big wraparound screen or whatever, or multiple screens, but they're still looking at flat surfaces. Whereas sooner or later, we're going to get to a point where you're going to be more and more immersed in that world. And, hopefully you're going to be looking at something interesting. And I think that convergence of what is a video game and what is passive entertainment, because I mean, it's already here, really. I mean, when you look at a game like The Last of Us, it's like half of that game is just you watching cutscenes, but they don't feel like cutscenes because they're so well integrated into the interactive portions that it's like you just feel like you're watching this movie that you occasionally take control of more than you're just playing a video game with cutscenes. So I think, that process of this merging of, different forms of entertainment and how we experience them and how we make them has been happening for a while, and it's just going to accelerate. So yeah, I think the sky is the limit, really.
Noah, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the video game industry that have been considering, like, what is this virtual production? Should I explore that? We'll find a lot of answers in this episode. And who knows, maybe we all together can build way more transmedia pieces. A lot of games going to be created. Like, I don't know, I've already hearing about games that while being in production also shoot stuff in LED volumes to shoot like telltale type of stories as a as a pre-game to game, which is going to build a more of a brand and marketing opportunities and stuff like that. I think with the wisdom that you have shared today, we will explore even more of those. Thank you so much. And I'm going to drop in the description of this video link to your channel as well, if people want to learn more about virtual production. Thank you so much, Noah. Thank you for
my
your
pleasure.
time.
Thanks for having me. Oh yeah. And also, anybody who wants to, I probably am the most active on LinkedIn. So yeah, if anybody wants to connect or just follow what I'm doing there, that's a good spot as well.
Awesome. Thanks.